Welcome to Breaking Down Mental Health with Dr. Jones. In these educational videos, Dr. Jones will discuss mental health diagnosis, clinical supervision, using technology in counseling, multiculturalism, and many other topics to help you get a healthy understanding of why mental health is important. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification button if you enjoy these videos. All right, I just want to welcome everybody here today and appreciate your attendance with us today. I'm just going to introduce myself real quick, and Dr. Page will introduce herself as well. We're going to be talking about the ethical use of AI in counseling and in counseling education. And so looking forward to talking about this timely topic that comes up a lot. And so we'll be looking at that. A lot of my research area goes back into ethics and anything technology related. I like talking about that stuff. So hopefully some of that will come out today as we're talking. Oh, yeah, sorry, Dr. Page, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's okay. I was like, am I next? Hey guys, I'm Dr. Kristen Page. I'm an associate professor here at UC and recognize some names and see some new ones as well. So excited to talk about this topic and hopefully get some good answers for you guys and some interaction as well.
All right, so what I want to do is quickly kind of go over some of the learning objectives we're going to have today so we can kind of have an idea of a roadmap of where we're going to be going. We're going to be first just going to identify some ethical issues related to the use of AI technologies in academic settings. Once again, this is something that has been a real big thing for the past couple of years, and we're talking about a lot more. So we want to spend some time today looking at some of the ethical issues that are coming up when it comes to using AI. We also want to talk about some of the potential benefits that AI tools can be used for graduate students and for faculty. And so we don't want to paint a picture today that AI in and of itself is a bad thing. It's just one of those things where knowing how to use it the right way. And so we want to talk about that as we go through our presentation today. And then we want to apply some ethical principles and frameworks on how to evaluate appropriate and responsible use of AI in academic settings. And so we're going to give you some examples and work with you on that as well. So just looking forward to talking with y'all about that today. So Dr. Page is going to be starting us off, and then I'll jump in here in just a little bit.
Thank you. All right, so we'll start off with just a picture of what is AI, and then delve into some different topic areas with it. So AI is a broad field of computer science, and it's mostly concerned with building smart machines that can perform pretty much amazing tasks at this point, that typically require human intelligence. So these tasks that it essentially is able to do. AI systems are designed to mimic the human cognitive functions. So it can mimic things like learning, it can mimic things like problem solving, perception, decision making, language. And there's several key components that AI, just to give you kind of a brief overview of what that looks like. We can flip to the next slide. Do I have control over that? I don't know. So one is machine learning, and this is a subset of AI, and it enables machines to learn from data. It identifies patterns, it makes decisions with very minimal human intervention. And machine learning algorithms improve their performance as the amount of data that they're exposed to increases. That's why you hear it gets better and better over time, right? Another one is deep learning, and this is a subset of machine learning. Deep learning uses neural networks with many layers, hence the word deep here, to analyze patterns in the data. And it's particularly powerful for tasks like images and speech recognition. So another component of AI that you guys might see out there. Another one is natural language processing, so also known as NLP. You'll see the acronym. So NLP allows machines to understand and interpret human language. It's the technology that you guys see with chatbots, with voice assistants, and translation services. So as you can tell, there's not one type of AI here in going through this list. We've also got robotics. Not all robots are AI powered, so good to know that. But those that are can interact with the physical world around them. They're the ones that you see that make decisions and perform actions that might be autonomous or semi-autonomous. And then we have expert systems. And these are AI systems that use databases of expert knowledge that will offer advice or they'll make decisions in fields. We see it more often in medical diagnosis or engineering. And then there's computer vision. And this technology enables machines to interpret and make decisions that are based on visual data. So things like facial recognition, object detection. You guys have probably heard of self-driving cars at this point. That's computer vision. And there are two main categories of AI. And the two types of AI that broadly can be categorized into one is narrow AI. It's also known as weak AI. And this is AI that's designed and trained for a particular task. So these are things like the virtual personal assistants, like Apple's Siri or Amazon's Alexa. Those are narrow AI. And then we have general AI. And you guys might see Gen AI as an acronym. It's also known as strong AI, and it involves creating systems that possess the ability to perform any intellectual task that a human being can do. This type of AI is still fairly theoretical and really a work in progress. In the educational context, AI can be utilized in a variety of ways. Let's flip to the next slide. Where do you guys think that you see AI around you? So what do you notice in your environment that you recognize AI?
My car brakes, the car in front of me.
Yeah, it automatically brakes for
Mhm.
you. Gotcha.
Yep.
Predictive text in on phones and even computers.
So you said predictive text?
Yes.
Cool.
Predictive songs, like in your Spotify playlist.
Ah, right. Yes. I see social media algorithm, then, right? There is truly student papers. We're going to get to that. And there is truly a host of ways that it's being used. I mean, to generate marketing messages and operate in Fortune 500 companies in a variety of ways. So it's being used in a lot of different directions. If you go to the next slide, here's a few examples. And what's interesting is it's been around us for a bit longer than I think we recognize. But now with some of these ways that we can interact with it a bit more, it's becoming more and more part of a daily, weekly, monthly routine. So you guys will see the Netflix on there, right? Same as Spotify, where it suggests what you should watch next, or the smart car that exists. Of course, Siri or any of these types of technologies that we have. IBM's Watson was one that we used with. And Watson, for instance, came out, I think, about 10 years ago, thereabouts, if I'm not mistaken. So it's been with us in a variety of forms over time. But now we're figuring out how to use it. All right, go ahead and go to the next one. I wanted to show you guys this. I find some of the data, of course, around it interesting. So this was a study that was done in the fall, so fall 2023. And what they asked was a series of the foremost experts in the world on AI when they thought that AI would be able to achieve different milestones. And so one of which was the Turing test, which is the horizontal lines, third grade. So would it be able to achieve a third grade level of understanding? Noble quality work, which that's the black boxes, and then superhuman capability. That's the gray. So the most extreme of them. And as you guys can see, where the majority of responses fell was in our 2020s. There is a decent subset who say later or never on a couple of those stronger areas. So interesting that the majority of responses aren't saying the 2030s or the 40s or the 50s when we think that AI is going to be able to or supersede our own human intelligence, so superhuman capability. All right, so all that to say is it is around us, right? And how do we interact with it in a way that we can benefit from and yet still use it ethically, of course. So AI in education, and we'll go a little bit of a deeper dive into this as we go along here, but a few broad areas that we're seeing it in education. One is personalized learning. So AI can analyze data on how a student learns, what they struggle with. They can tailor educational experiences. And ideally, this could potentially learn or lend itself to more effective learning outcomes. There's things like automated grading, so especially for things like multiple choice, but there are more advanced systems being developed to grade written answers as well. Then we have intelligent tutoring systems. So these are computer systems that provide the immediate and personalized feedback to students. They don't need human intervention, and they can help students to understand more complex subjects. There's also educational games and simulations that exist in education. And there's content creation. So customizing learning materials based on trends and student needs, things like lesson plans, online course content, textbooks. There's language learning. So there's AI-powered platforms that can help students learn new languages through natural language processing, allowing for a natural form of conversation practice and immediate feedback on it. And then there's administrative tasks, and AI can stream administrative duties for institutions and really for a variety of companies. That's not unique to education, but things like scheduling, allowing them to focus on other areas. So really, when it comes to AI in education, there's a variety of ways that we can interact with it, and we can identify potential areas that need assistance and see where AI can provide solutions. What's important, of course, is that we get proper training and support to figure out how to integrate it, and that we prioritize privacy and ethical considerations when we're putting it into place. It does offer the potential to transform traditional methods of working in higher ed as a student, as an educator. I think let's flip to the next. All right, so an important point, and some of you may find yourselves in the classroom or CS students out there TAing and then eventually working or walking into jobs in higher ed. And one thing is, and honestly, this goes for anyone in general at this point, is to stop pretending that it doesn't exist. So there's a huge amount of interest in generative. Remember that, Jen, I was talking about artificial intelligence in the consumer world. It's been particularly exploded since ChatGPT has come out, essentially a free program, right, where we can interact with AI in a way that's different than we had before. But there are worries about how AI generated content can be biased or inaccurate and sometimes contain entirely false information, which you'll hear of termed hallucinations. And so what we want to is explore this. And sometimes we want to figure out to get to a place where we're essentially dancing with AI and dancing with the robots rather than standing on the sidelines. And so you see here, I'm saying that we can't walk away from it. Stop pretending it doesn't exist. We have to face the reality of the fact that it is here. People are utilizing it. And so we have to figure out how can we come around side it or understand it enough to understand when people are utilizing it and how they are. There are people around you already experimenting with it, right? So use AI alongside your students, engaging with generative AI tools with your students in person when possible. Otherwise, share AI generated responses to questions during class time, for example, and ask students to consider them or have students experiment with the technology at home, document their experiences, and then share them. So really kind of taking steps into what does this look like and how does it work? Another is teaching students how to ask the Chat GTP tool questions. So some of this is about how to ask the question in the right way, so that you're forming what you want out of AI. And I'll give you guys some examples here in a minute. We want to be able to teach students to do what artificial intelligence cannot do. For example, unlike robots, we can ask ourselves questions. And that is what students essentially can be trained in, is to know how to ask the questions and learn how to critique their own questions, their frameworks, and the answers that are generated by AI. And students can start with topics and questions that they're interested in, ask ChatGTP for answers. For example, a couple of our doc students were telling me last night that they were putting in, show me a 2,000 calorie meal plan, right? And it gave them this detailed meal plan with a shopping list and, and all of these answers, right? But something that's of interest to you, right? Is there something that you would be interested in, and kind of start there and figuring out how to utilize it? Through a series of questions, you can really get to know what you want to know or how to ask what you're interested in. Use generative AI tools to spark imagination. So a frequent concern is that generative AI is that students will use it to cheat, avoid the hard work of thinking for themselves, of generating dialogue. But tools like ChatGTP should really challenge teachers, should challenge students to reassess. So as an instructor, when you guys are walking into the classroom, reassessing the assignments that you're giving, you have to stop thinking that you can teach exactly the way you used to when the basic medium has changed. If students can turn to ChatGTP or other AI language models for quick and for easy answers, then there's a problem with the lesson, right? We need to go deeper. We need to go at it in a different way that generates that critical thought. Let's switch slides. So I'm going to show you guys and a couple of examples here on the teaching side, and then we'll do some on the student side a little bit later. So I will share my screen when I find the share button. All right, everybody see my screen up here? Okay, so this is Chat GTP, GPT, keep saying that. And as you guys can see, I've had some things in here. You guys will notice at the bottom, it does say, as a disclaimer, that at the very bottom, it says Chat GPT can make mistakes. Consider checking important information, right? So it's telling you that. So I'm going to put a prompt in here, and this is to create an authentic assessment for a doctoral course on supervision. In a counselor education and in supervision program, include a rubric. So I'm telling it what to do here. And we'll see what it pops out. Because what's going to happen is every time it creates something, it's going to look a little bit different than it did the last time. So you could put in the same prompt several times, and it's going to have variations on what it's doing. So we've got an objective here, as you guys can see, some task descriptions. It's creating a rubric with criteria. But my question's pretty broad. And so it really would spur some ideas or areas for going, okay, like, well, that's interesting. You know, what topic am I looking for here? Or maybe I want to delve into something related to this, or that was interesting. It brought that up. So some areas to explore. Certainly, for example, rubrics can look very different. And so this may not fall anywhere in line with the way I need to create a rubric for the point value or the assignment of the class. So variations on this, but it certainly gets a conversation started. It certainly provides some information. and pretty robust in a sense. What do you guys think?
It's a little maddening how fast it does it.
Yeah, can't even type that fast. All right, I'm going to show you one other here. And this is also on the teaching side of things. So write a 5-question exam, 3 multiple choice, 1 true false, and 1 short essay. So now I'm being fairly specific for a doctoral level counselor education and supervision course on supervision models. Of course, the question is, did I even cover this material in my class, right? Is this something that I even engage with? When I start putting these in, I don't know about you guys, but I do start asking questions because I'm like, well, it's like I said, a start sometimes. We've got a grading rubric for the short essay question. I'm trying to go up here. There we go. We've got our true false question, our short essay question. It put words in there for it. So interesting. A couple things to caution if you guys ever do go in there and decide to pull out GPT for something like that, is that quizzes, both multiple choice and short answer. I'm sorry, we'll pull back up the slides. They went away. Yeah, it's okay. One more, 2 more. There you go. So both the multiple choice and the short answer quizzes are easy to plug into AI for answers, sure. And so what we want to be also aware of is that will students utilize things like that? And that's where it comes back to what types of questions are we asking and how are we putting that around? So there is online proctoring technology that's helpful, or of course, doing things within the context of the classroom. Go to the next slide, would you? Thank you. So a couple of reported usage of a student, another fall study, fall 2023. And this was interesting to me for how people were interacting as a student with AI for non-daily usage and daily usage. So the top reported non-daily usage was understanding difficult concepts, summarizing or paraphrasing text, and assisting with writing assignments. The top reported daily usage was summarizing or paraphrasing text, organizing schedule, and answering homework questions. And as you can see, people are aware and utilizing it, right? I mean, it does exist, and there are daily usage functions of some of these resources that are occurring. So using AI as a student, there you go. Next slide, there you go. So as a student, the areas to use AI in can be things like research and information gathering. There is a powerful search engine that exists within Chat GPT or some of the other resources. We can find relevant information, we can find papers, and sometimes it assists in ways that other resources haven't. There's writing and editing assistance. So tools like Grammarly are AI. Turnitin is a form of AI that assists us with helping to improve our writing skills. It'll check grammar, punctuation, style. And I'll share a resource with you guys at the end. Another one, Grammarly Go, that also assists with really kind of looking at bigger picture with not just revising, right, but things you can do along the way to help improve your writing so that as you write other things, you're not making the same mistakes with it. Study and revision tools. So AI-driven apps and platforms can create personalized study plans for you. They can create flashcards. You can ask it for practice tests, right? Like, let's say there's a concept that you want to know more about, and I'll show you guys that in a little while. So these tools can adapt to your learning pace and the style of the student, and helping you figure out some areas of improvement. There's time management and organization. There are AI-powered virtual assistants and scheduling tools. They can help us manage time, track deadlines, help prioritize tasks. Any of our doc students working on dissertation, maybe that helps. And then tutoring and academic support. So intelligent tutoring systems and AI tutors can provide personalized tutoring sessions in subjects where students may need extra help. These systems offer step-by-step guidance and feedback, so helping students to learn at their own pace. And then, of course, the apps for language learning, like Duolingo. So they use machine learning algorithms to really personalize the learning experience to figure out how to learn a new language. There's career prep and guidance. So AI tools that can analyze job market trends. Try searching for some of those areas, really interesting in itself. Resume writing assistance. And then for students with disabilities, that's been helpful with AI-powered tools, offering things like text-to-speech and speech-to-text examples, for example. So making learning materials better accessible than they even were before for students if you have visual impairments or learning disabilities. And then networking, collaboration projects. So AI-powered platforms can connect students with peers and professionals in their field of study to collaborate. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Jones.
All right. So one of the things I will say as I was doing research for this presentation, I learned a lot just because of it. There's so much information that is out there right now about AI, and once again, trying to get it down to a place where we're able to kind of walk through it and use it in a way that we can use it for whether it's with students or with as counsel educators or even in our clinical work. I want to try to kind of help us to kind of start looking at some questions to start considering. And so what I looked here is when we're trying to think about the ethical part of it, these are 4 questions I think is important for us to just start off before we even get into the code of ethics or get into anything else. These are 4 questions we want to look at. First one is the AI generated content accurate? And so I think what that helps, I think that's a good place for us to start, because we know it when you look at ChatGPT at the bottom of the page, it already tells you, okay, this may need to be this may need to be looked at. And so I'll go and say it's not a may need, it does need to be looked at. You know, whenever we are creating this information that's out there, it's gathering information and it's also gathering other people's mistakes that's happened before in the past as well. So to me, it's an important part to make sure that if we're going to be using this AI technology in these formats, is to make sure that we're going back and we're checking and once again using this as a start off place versus it being the end all be all of everything that we do. And so I'm always going to go back and test and see how accurate is the information that is in there. And if it's not, once again, I need to work on making sure that information is accurate, because I want to make sure that I'm giving out accurate information, or if I'm creating a test or whatever the case may be, that the information there is accurate as well. Also, can other credible sources outside of generative AI validate the data or item produced? So what other sources really match up with the stuff that you're doing? So as I've seen before papers or what, for example, where someone has written on a certain topic. And so they'll write the paper, they'll use ChatGPT, for example, and they'll even ask for it to give them citations. But then when you look at the citations, the citations really don't go anywhere because it's not real because the information there is not real information. And so once again, being able to use our skills to be able to go back and find credible sources that match up and that work well with the information that we're looking up helps out quite a bit because it helps us to be able to show, okay, this information is good. This is information that I can use. But once again, I use this as a starting point for what I'm doing. But I use my own cognitive skills to be able to go and stretch this and make it go even further by making sure that the sources that I have with this are credible. And once again, but I'm not using the AI technology to be able to do that. Also, how does information generated impact or influence your thinking on this topic? So let's just say, for instance, I'm pull up a topic I'm trying to research, and I've already kind of have a bias on the way in which I'm looking at the information, and now I've got a certain point I want to prove. And so I'm using this AI to help me with the outline or even with the research itself. But the information it's finding is significantly different than what I'm looking for. Now, once again, I have this conflict I have to go through. Okay, once again, am I right about this? Is the AI technology right about this? And so for me to figure that out, I have to go back to number one and number two. I have to go back and test the accuracy not only of the things I'm thinking, but also test the accuracy of what's being said on AI technology. And also, once again, having those credible sources on both ends. And I think that really helps us to be able to see, am I coming to this topic with a bias? Am I coming to this topic from a certain way where I'm trying to make the research, or I'm trying to make what the presentation I'm saying match what I want to say, or is there actually different viewpoints I need to make sure I'm bringing up as I'm using that? So I think that's another way for I think that's considered. Also, who is represented in this data? So I'm gonna give you some couple of ways to use it with clinical clients a little bit later on. When we start thinking about data and just in research in general, one thing we always talk about is stuff being valid and stuff being reliable as well. And so when we're looking at some of these sources, like what certain populations were chosen when this data was collected, whenever it's being used. And so we have to be really mindful of that to make sure that the whatever information we're putting out there can be used and be applied to different populations of people. And so that becomes important. And also, is the data inclusive in terms of the material scope and perspectives that it presents? So how much information am I really getting about this topic as I'm looking up? And how inclusive is this data? Is it looking at multiple different authors as it's bringing this information up, or is it only citing only one source when I'm doing that? So once again, I really feel like part of this whole ethical process that we go through, we talk about an ethical decision-making model just in counseling in general. I feel like when we're looking at ethics of using AI, we had to have some type of model in our head and some questions that we need to ask ourselves of, if I'm going to use this information, or if I'm going to even use this as a starting point for any work I'm going to do, I have to start somewhere with questions to help me realize, is this a good place to start, or do I need to go someplace else to begin this project or paper or whatever it is I'm working on? And to me, these are some really good questions to at least start the process of thinking through as I'm trying to work on whatever projects I'm using, especially when we're looking at AI. Now, one of the things that's come up quite a bit is we asked the question, what does ACA Code of Ethics say about AI, and what are universities saying about AI? Now, this is let me make sure I say this first. Whatever I'm saying right now is only reflective of my own personal opinion. I want to make sure I say that before I get into the rest of this stuff when it comes to ethics, because I do have a few opinions on this. But when we talk about our code of ethics, I'm not sure. Here we go. When we talk about our code of ethics, we have to go back and realize, okay, this code of ethics came out in 2014. Now we're in 2024, which means it was written probably around 2012. And by all estimates, we're probably at least 4 to 5 years out before having a new code. So if you go directly to the code of ethics and look specifically for the term artificial intelligence or AI, you're not going to find that in there. So for me, it's like, okay, what are the principles that we can find in the code of ethics that would help us to kind of guide ourselves as we're trying to look at what we're doing? So one of the first things that I've started with at the beginning of the code of ethics is just looking at all those professional values that the code of ethics talks about. One of them just talk about safeguarding the integrity of the counselor-client relationship. And this is, I brought this one up specifically because we're going to talk a little bit about note-taking, especially when we're using AI with clients. And being mindful that if we're going to be using that process, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that a little bit later on, but if we are going to be using AI for like clinical notes and things of that nature, we have to be mindful that if I'm using any client information, like specific client information, like their name, date of birth, things, those things that they could break HIPAA. Those are things I don't want to put into something like ChatGPT because now that information is in there and we've added to the database that way. So to me, I think one of the ethical things we need to be mindful of is just making sure that we're still trying to safeguard the integrity of that client-counsel relationship when it comes to ethics. Also, practicing in a competent and ethical manner is really important. So as we talk about, when we get to the clinical aspects of it too, we're going to be looking at, okay, how competent am I in some of these areas when I'm trying to whether present on it, write on it, or the case may be if I'm writing a paper on it, or if I'm working with a client as well. Where is my level of competency before I step into the room with that? And so that's something that we make sure we have to continue to make sure that's one of the forefront of our mind is that we're still practicing with competence, that we know what it is that we're talking about before we step into that room. And AI can really affect that if we don't use it in the right way. And also that principle of beneficence, and being mindful that if we're going to be using AI technology, that when it talks about beneficence, it's not talking about the beneficence of me as the clinician. It's talking about beneficence of the client. And so are we using this technology in such a way that's going to benefit the client? And so when I think about clinical notes and I think about other things that people are doing with ChatGPT and other AI technology, obviously there is some benefit on my end where I'm able to, especially if I'm using clinical notes and things of that nature, I am benefiting from that, from the time it takes and everything. But if that is the only reason why I'm using it, then I once again I need to ask myself the question: how is this benefiting the client by me using this technology? So I just want to me, that's something just to kind of be mindful of and to think about. When we look specific at the code, and there's a couple of different things specifically it talks about. It's pretty straightforward, and I'll give you my little speech as I talk about plagiarism, and I talk about AI, and I talk about ethics in general. For me, especially as I talk about using AI or talk about being ethical when it comes to in the classroom, one of the things the way I look at it is that there is definitely, I feel like, a parallel between how I act as a student when it comes to using AI and how I'm going to act as a clinician as well. So if I'm willing to be unethical with the stuff that I'm doing in a counseling program, for example, where I'm using this technology in the wrong way, then my question is, what shortcuts are you going to take with a client once you have that client in front of you? And so when we're seeing when we're starting to see more and more things about it, I mean, it's pretty straightforward. As counselors do not plagiarize. And so so to me, that's about as close as we're going to get to AI in the code of ethics but it's very specific. It talks about making sure that we're not plagiarizing, we're not presenting other people's work as our own. And we're going to talk a little bit more about how we can do this and do it in the right way, but we just simply don't plagiarize as counselors. Now, section H1A, when we look at that, that's, I would say, traditionally is what we would say is the telemental health section of the code of ethics. But as we're reading H1A, it talks about distance counseling, but also just talks about technology in general and making sure that we have the right type of skills regarding that technology, whether that's through certifications or additional coursework, things of that nature. And so for me, I think it's important for us, if we're going to be using AI in technology, we should be to be very careful with that. I think it's good for us to be able to use it if we're using it in the right way. But from an ethical perspective, the question becomes, okay, what training have I done? Did I just kind of jump on ChatGPT and just throw something together? And I can say, well, since I've been using it through my grad program, I know what I'm doing. Or is there specialized training you can get into to help you to understand it a lot better? And so I just think the more we're getting trained in this area and finding out more about AI is going to be helpful for us because it gives us more confidence in the area. And that way we're able to practice our counseling in such a way that we are familiar with the technology, and especially when it's going to be directly affecting our clients. We want to make sure we're using it in a way that's going to be helpful from that perspective. Now, from the university perspective, we're seeing a lot of different university issues that are happening when it comes to the use of AI. When the first one, and all these, if you notice, all these were from articles from like last year, because once again, this is what's been talked about quite a bit. This first article is actually looking at two different sides of the same story here when it comes to university policy, well, not university policy, but university issues when it comes to admissions, for example. There are actually universities out there that will use AI technology for its admissions process into their programs that they have. And so you as an individual, if you're trying to get into a program, whether it's a master's program or bachelor's program or doc program, whatever the case may be, you may not be comfortable with knowing that it's not a person who is going through your application and things of that nature, that AI technology is being used on that end of it to be able to see whether or not you are a good fit for whatever type of program you're trying to get into. And so there's been some people who are students who have issues with it or question that technology from that perspective. But also serving on the other end of that perspective, being on the admissions committee, having done at the master's level and also done that at the PhD level, one of the things we would normally do was do an interview with students to get into the program. The thing that has changed now for a lot of universities is they've gotten rid of any type of interview process for that. And so what we're getting is we're having a lot of applications that are coming through where people are using AI technology to write their admissions essays to get into programs. The reason why that becomes problematic is because if several people are using the same technology, the same type of answers are coming up over and over again. And so that for those people who are in these programs who are trying to, who are actually manually reading through this paperwork, this is causing problems for them because now they're noticing pretty much a lot of these are saying the same thing all the way through. And so since all these entrance exams are saying the same thing, this obviously coming from a similar source. So even though something may be worded a little bit different than someone else's, they're still hitting some of the exact same points in the exact same order, things of that nature. And so it's making it a lot more difficult for individuals, for universities to be able to say, okay, how do we navigate AI, especially when students are using this just to even get into the program? So we're not even talking about what they do once they get into the program, but if they're using it to even get into the program, that's become a problematic issue that we're starting to see. Also, last year's article came out from Rex that talks about the lack of policies that universities have when it comes to using AI. So I think many institutions are beginning to write policies and things of that nature, but the majority of them don't have really laid out things to help us to be able to see, okay, what do we do when we're suspecting AI is being used in the classroom? And so that has become a question, but not having straight out policies about it, even though we know students are using it, those two things have to go together. And I really appreciate Dr. Page, as she was talking earlier about, we can't just act like it's not happening. We have to acknowledge the fact that people are using the software. And so since they are using this software and using this tool, we need to have some policies that really match well with that so that we don't just ignore this it's being used, but have some ways of showing people how to use it in the right way so that they're not breaking any policies if there are policies that are there. Third point is pretty straightforward. Plagiarism obviously is a big issue that we are seeing in student papers from a university perspective, and this is a global issue that we're seeing. Is that once again looking at individuals' papers, noticing the changing of tone in the paper, or noticing, well, I've seen two papers from this particular person, and I've got the writing style down, and now it's at this totally different level, and it sounds significantly different. And plagiarism becomes a big issue that we're seeing in counselor education and just in education in general. And so to me, that's one of those things we're going to have to learn how to work through is, okay, how do we go about dealing with those issues, if we're teaching how to use it ethically and then someone's still not using it in an ethical manner, trying to figure out how to deal with this plagiarism issue. And the last one, which really threw me off, was a lack of accuracy on plagiarism detectors. So there's a lot of great software that is out there when it comes to looking at plagiarism, specifically looking at AI technology. But this article in specific was talking about the fact that when they start doing testing on these websites that you're able to go to check for AI, the range of accuracy on these on for those checkers was very wide, from going from as low as 16% going up as high as 88%. And so that's a really big range that you have there. So if depending on what software I'm using, if it's only 16% reliable, then once again, that's probably not something that's going to be, it's not going to be helpful for me in that spot if I'm trying to be able to detect those type of things, where some of them do go as high as 88%. And so obviously research on the part of the person who is doing the teaching and things, I think is going to be very helpful. But those are some of the issues we've been seeing that schools are saying there are problems to deal with because of the rise of AI technology, especially in higher education. So I want to kind of transition and talk a little bit about using AI ethically in clinical practice. This was fun for me. I'm looking at this because there was a few of these things I tried myself, and I won't share my screen just because there's a time and everything. But one thing we have to remember about looking at AI is that, just like Dr. Page was saying earlier, making sure we know how to ask the right questions gets you the right type of response, at least help you get it started in the right direction that you're working on. So, for example, clinical note writing, and this is something I've been actually playing around with here recently, where I have very bulleted pointed notes that I will take during a counseling session. And so in those bullet points, I'm talking about things that are going on in the session. I may even put a direct quote in those bulleted notes, but there's nothing specific about the client's name or anything like that. And so, for example, what I would do is I would go to something like ChatGPT, and there's other different software out there where you have to tell the program how to think. So I'll say, you are a clinical mental health counselor. Please write a case note based upon the information provided below. And you put that in there. And it's amazing how it would take those bullet points and it will flesh them out significantly to be able to show you what exactly happened in the session. And a lot of times it's fairly accurate. There's times you still need to be able to change that. But one thing I've noticed that it has helped to be able to, when it comes to wording and making sure things are being worded clinically, that has helped out quite a bit by using those clinical notes. Clinical note writing. And once again, I think there's a way of being able to do that and do it in an ethical way where we're not using client information as a part of that. Also, just suggestions for treatment planning. I know I've never been a big fan of the treatment planning books. I know some of you may like them. I'm just I'm not a fan of those myself. But there may be some times where you're kind of feeling stuck on treatment plans. And once again, trying to figure out what are some ideas to do for a treatment plan for a particular client. Once again, you're able to go to the software and be able to, once again, you have to tell it how to think, So you're a clinical mental health counselor or whatever the case may be. And I'm going to say, looking for a suggested treatment plan for client who is dealing with depression and anxiety and looking for some short-term and long-term goals for that. You're able to put that in there, and once again, it's able to give suggestions. And I like the term suggestion because once again, the stuff in there may not match your client. So I want to make sure that I am being mindful of not just copying and pasting directly from there and saying, hey, I've got the treatment plan done. I want to be mindful of the things that are in there and be able to think about, okay, is this really a good interaction? Is this really a good objective or goal for this client? If it is, maybe I need to modify something to fit to what I'm trying to do. But once again, I use this as a starting point for me to be as I'm working with it, but not necessarily not necessarily the copy and paste and put it directly in there, because I want to make sure that there is that my words and my reflections And my clinical experience is coming through this as well, whether it's the clinical note writing or the suggestions for treatment planning. Another thing is creative activities to use in session. So imagine you are in a session and you get it at the last minute and you're not really sure where to go with that group for that day or activities to do. So so I put in there yesterday, just kind of playing around with it. Um, uh, Once again, I'm a clinical mental health counselor, so tell Chat GPT that, and then we'll say working with a client who is 5 years old who is struggling with anxiety. List 5 interactive activities we can do during the session to help deal with the client's anxiety. Put those things in there. And now I have these activities that I'm able to look at, and they're based on age and different things like that. And once again, it may be a situation where you didn't have an idea to go in there with, or they're coming later that day. You're trying to think of some things to do, but it once again, it's a good way to help start the creation process. And so for me, as we're going through these, I look at these as being these are places for me to start. It's not the end all be all of everything. I use it to help me to start as well. Another one I did real quick was talking about outlines for group counseling curriculum. And so, once again, talked about the fact that I wanted an outline for a group counseling curriculum. So I told ChatGPT that I wanted to do a group on the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. I wanted to do a 12-week group, and I wanted an outline that would coincide with each step of the 12 steps. And so I put that in there and was able to outline some, once again, not the full curriculum, but once again, some guiding points or points of conversation to start with. And once again, it was helpful on that part to be able to do that. And those things were, for me, I like that as well. And also to create clinical interventions. So, wording is sometimes it's hard when you're trying to figure out how to do certain things. And so I just put the example in here of, okay, so I have a 5-year-old client and I am really struggling with, maybe I'm used to working with adults and I'm trying to figure out, okay, how do I explain to a 5-year-old client what is depression and what does depression look like? I'm able to go in and ask that specific question. Now, as a mental health counselor, I'm trying to explain the concept of depression to a 5-year-old. What would some of that wording look like? Once again, I'm not going to use it word for word, but it gives me a place to be able to start. And so, like for me, for some of the clinical implications of it, I don't think we've even scratched the surface yet on what all can be done with AI from the clinical perspective. I think the reality of it is just making sure that we are once again using this as a starting point for the information we're looking for and not just the end all be all for everything we're doing. I think we have to use our own critical thinking skills to be able to get it to the place where it needs to be. And that's going to help us up quite a bit as we're trying to work with clients. I'm going to throw it back to Dr. Page.
And then my mute button. All right, so I want to take a look at really talking about writing here and how we can utilize AI, because that's how many of you may come across it as students in a variety of ways. So there's a 7-step writing process essentially that AI can help us with. One is choosing a topic, brainstorming, outlining. It can help us with drafting, soliciting feedback, revising, and proofreading. So AI can help us in any of these steps in the writing process. For example, the soliciting feedback one. Without AI, we may ask another person for feedback on our assignment. And consider instead, if you were to use AI, we could put in a prompt. I think that prompt might be on the next page, Dr. Jones. Yes. All right. So I'm going to share my screen again. Getting there. All right. So if I share my screen and I put this prompt in, can you guys see my screen? Okay, good. So if I put in this prompt, which reads as, please act as a experienced university English professor. Provide me with usable feedback on how to improve my writing composition. Check the writing that I will provide by reviewing its logic, ensuring it's well organized and has a good thesis statement, has proper evidence to support the main ideas, uses compelling language appropriate to the audience, demonstrates clear, fluid use of syntax, proper grammar, and mechanics, and is error-free. You could go to your rubric, for example, and look at what are some of the things that are being asked of you to provide, right? And you can ask AI as part of that prompt that you enter to provide feedback on this. So do not, note it says at the end, do not provide a revised version of the writing provided. Do you understand? And so we'll go ahead and we can put that in. And so I can put that in first. And then I can provide right after that a writing sample, and it will provide feedback based on the fact that I just put in that initial prompt. So you can copy and paste your writing into it. But an important point to note is we're asking it not to provide a revised version of the writing provided. I don't want it to change the writing provided. And I got to be honest, from how I've interacted with AI, it doesn't always provide the level of writing that is expected of my master's and my doc students. And so keeping that in mind, I'm not looking for it to redo my writing, but this feedback may be helpful in the same way that I might have used another human being. I'm going to jump back here real quick. I'll give you guys another example. I don't think do I need to share my screen again? Sorry, Dr. Jones,
Yeah, you have to share it again.
no, the PowerPoint.
Oh, the PowerPoint. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. All right, so we can consider additional ways to understand a topic better, right? So let's say I just want to understand something further, or I'm not sure what a term is, and I want it to explain to me or tease out the concept further. And so I can type in additional areas, or I can type in additional words. But a few things to keep in mind when you're doing that is these concepts of task, instructions, context, reasons, and clarification. So I'll show you guys an example. And those 5 things are essentially how AI is organized, and that if we respond to each of those areas in the information that we're giving it, it'll give us a better response. So the prompt we're going to enter here in a second is, please act as a university counseling professor and explain the concept of Freud's id, ego, and superego. I am taking a class and I didn't understand it fully. Explain it so I can understand what it represents, so I can better contribute to the discussion on this in class. Do you understand? So the task is explaining the concept of Freud's id, ego, and superego. The instructions we're giving it is explain it so that I understand what it represents. The context is that we want it to act as a university, well, not philosophy, counseling professor. And the reasons are that so I can better contribute to the discussion on this in class. And then I'm asking a clarification. Do you understand? It's almost as if we're having a conversation in a way with another human being, in how we're asking or communicating with the AI system. And so I will share my screen on these 2 prompts I'm going to do with you guys here. I need to get back to the AI system. Sorry. There you go. All right. So if I put in that prompt that I just read you guys, it's a bit detailed in what I'm asking and how I'm hoping that it understands. Oh, I'm sorry. I put in the wrong one. The one I just did before. So let's see what type of response it generates. So it's going to give us some basic information about what the id, the ego, and the superego is. It's not a 10-page document, but it's providing some basic information about how it operates. But let's say that I don't fully understand still, right? Let's say what it's provided isn't providing the answer that I'd like. I could type in something like, I'm still not fully getting this. Can you please explain this to me as if I'm a freshman in high school? Please use simpler language and include some examples. And AI is going to do that. So it'll take the language down to a level at which you may better appreciate it. And some examples, right? Maybe I'm like, I need some kind of context here for what this looks like. So our example here, your id is saying, forget your homework, video games are way more fun. And the ego is trying to work out the plan. So you can see the context that it's providing with the examples. Kind of clever. Let's say I want to go deeper, right? I need some practice. Let's say you guys are preparing for your CPC exam, for example, right? I need some practice questions. What if I put in, please act as my university counseling professor, pretend that we're in class, and ask me 3 questions of different difficulty on Freud's the id, ego, and superego, one at a time, that my professor might ask. Let me answer, do not answer for me, give me feedback, and then ask me another question. After all 3 questions have been asked, give me overall feedback. So we're being pretty specific with the system here. So it's going to ask me the question, right? And I'm going to provide a response and so forth, because I've given it that initial prompt. So we can essentially quiz ourselves, right? We can flashcards of sort here. We can ask it to do that, not just looking up a topic, but going beyond that to dig further into material that we want to know. All right, I'm going to stop my share. What do you guys, what are some ways that you guys think that you could ethically use AI as a student? How do you think you are conceptualizing it or have used it?
I think it helps to get started sometimes in your writing. For example, if you're having, writer's block and, again, just kind of giving you some ideas, maybe some recommendations in a direction in terms of research, making sure you have your references and your citations. And Chat GPT's actually helped me with a couple of my citations, and a couple of the papers I've done already. So I'm just starting the program, so I got a long way to go.
Yeah, definitely teasing out research topics. So maybe I'm like, hey, I'd like to look at, X. Let's just put it in, see where I go, right? Maybe it furthers a discussion, or a conversation on other areas as I narrow further down what I actually want to research or what I actually want to look at. What else?
So if I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, please go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say if I write something and it's not very like a sentence and I just hate how it's worded or it's not worded clearly or well, I can say put it in and say provide 5 other ways to say this more clearly or more whatever I would want it to be, and look at those options, and then I might choose one part of this option and one part of this option that's worded a little bit better and more clearly.
Yes. So revising something or providing additional wording choices. There are some additional resources I'm going to share with you guys too. I listed them on the next slide, but we can also share some of those links so that you've got them. One is talking about hallucinations. You guys heard me mention earlier. So students being careful to check anything, of course, that's generated through AI. References, correct years, may not match content all the time. The content itself may not be accurate. And so a good resource on that is the link I've provided here. You do have to cite the use of AI, which is a relatively new concept, but just like anything else, it's another resource, right? And so if you follow the link that I've got here, it takes you to a Cumberland site. If you scroll down just a little bit, is going to talk about citing it in APA style. Privacy issues, of course, we want to ensure that avoid submitting any personal information with AI. So we don't want to do that. And then, of course, just discussing or understanding the inherent bias that exists within AI. So I've got an article here on that for you guys. And students shouldn't use AI to write a full assignment, but rather generating ideas, right? We're talking about different ways to engage with it from that 7-step writing task, for instance, I was sharing with you. You may also find that Grammarly Go, I was mentioning earlier, it'll guide the writing, not write it for you. And so there's a YouTube a bit more about that. So we'll share some of that with you guys as well. I'd love to take questions in the few minutes that we have left. I know this is a fairly large topic that will only continue to evolve, just like the AI itself. So feel free to, what's on your mind? What are you thinking about this?
Hi, Dr. Page. I have a question. So, if we're using it like as an outline, the first time I was actually exposed to it was in online teaching and learning, when we talked about how to use it to try to help design courses in an ethical way. And the way Dr. Simmons had mentioned it had a lot to do with what Dr. Jones was talking about how you worded the prompt in it. You know, you would put the idea in your idea into the interface and then ask for its feedback, but it wasn't generating like the idea for you per se, just kind of giving you feedback. But my question is, if we use it to like, you know, as an outline, um, in terms of getting an idea for a topic or something along those lines, should we cite that as well? Like that we have used it to generate the idea for some, you know, like just the general flow of it.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And I think it largely depends on when you say generating the idea, like are we copying text from it, right? In which case you're going to want to cite it. The best rule of thumb too, so I don't know if you guys noticed when I was in GPT, and if you guys have done this yourself, it does maintain a log. And so I can go back and pull up other things that I've entered and things of that nature. And I think it's important because if you're ever questioned on the material that you have or that you're submitting, that you're able to show evidence, let's say in your Word document, that you've made edits along the way. And so I can show different timestamps with that. That looks like I can pull up my chat GPT and showcase, here's how I interacted with it. And look, here's the framework or the outline, that it provided. And then I went from there on it. And so I like that it does store that on Chat GPT. So you're able to go back to it. But to fully answer your question, if you're copying material from it, then we're citing it. And I do think this is evolving. So I'm wondering if that answer to your question will change in a year, but for the time being.
Right. It's more like for like the way that I had never been exposed to it prior to online teaching and learning. It actually blew my mind, to be quite honest with you. And just watching what you have shown today is like a bit overwhelming that the technology can do that.
Yeah.
But the piece about getting the actual, like for example, if it gives you a suggestion for like a topic to pursue, in a situation like that, it's really not giving you any anything other than a suggestion, but you've still utilized it to kind of get a topic idea. So in that regard, is that something that you would cite? I mean, because it did generate a topic
Right.
for you.
So I encourage you to always go back to your instructor, right? So the person that the writing assignment is coming from, or your chair for your dissertation, or things like that, because that's going to be a resource on that. But think of AI in a way too, where if I put into Google a topic and I'm just exploring or reading through the research and I'm generating ideas by reading different things that come out, I wouldn't necessarily sort it. So that's my opinion, on that. But if I'm copying words, right, like literally plagiarizing, then I'm needing to cite it.
I do like the idea that you had about, since ChatGPT does keep everything in line. I think that's really important to keep a log of whatever you're using that for. I think that's going to be very helpful, because if there ever is a question, that's going to be I think that's going to be helpful in the long run. So obviously, you want to definitely talk to your professor about it if you're using it. But even with that, I would definitely keep a log of what I've done and be able to show. We've always done show your work. So yeah, so I was definitely make sure I had that up there as well. And I think that definitely would be a benefit to you in the long run. If there ever is a question on how much did you pull from a certain place and things of that nature.
Because I will say, even as a professor, I've been able to recognize some of the discussion board posts already, right? That you can tell because the format or the way in which AI speaks is particular. And so just having that just to support, like, hey, here's what I'm doing, or what that looks like, really could become important as this continues on down the road. But who knows? I mean, AI is evolving. So like I said, in a year, it could look different. All right. Well, I certainly welcome the conversation as we go along, exploring the use of this and how it interacts with what we're doing here at UC and your work. Thanks, guys, for being here tonight. And I think there was a question about printing out the PowerPoints. I know we can get those links to you guys as well, for sure. So we'll find a way to do that. Dr. Bonfini, you got any helpful? Yeah,
Yep. If you send it to me, I will post it.
great.
And whatever you do, do not use ChatGPT for diagnosing.
Oh,
That is a surefire way to have something marked wrong on a paper, because it can't really do some of the nuances with context and cultural things. And I've noticed that just in grading papers recently, that people were putting in like a case presentation, and what would the diagnosis be, and what it's giving them is something entirely different. So don't do that, whatever you do.
I knew my doctor was wrong. I knew it.
All right, everyone. You guys have a great night. Thanks for being here.
Thank y'all.
Thank you.